Okay, Rabotai, Shalom Aleichem. As we begin, Baruch Shechionu v'Kivonu v'Yiganu L'Zman Hazeh, we're starting right before Shavuot. If you think about it, it's already less than a week to Shavuot, and Shavuot, like I was talking to Rabbi Natan today, we say it's Chachamim tell us Shavuot is a Yom Din, just like Rosh Hashanah. So just before Rosh Hashanah, you take a Kabbalah, you take something on you to get ready for the Chag, to get ready to go have a good judgment. So especially when it comes to Shavuot, the judgment on Torah, person's chelik in Torah, how apropos that we're going to start the Tzurba series in Hilchot Shabbat. Okay, now we all know that it's the Chachamim tell us that the Daled Amot of Halacha are very, very special. That's what Hashem loves the most, is when someone learns Halacha. Because Halacha really is the meat and bones of a Jew. What makes a Jew a Jew? What makes a Jew tick? What makes the Jew different than anyone else? It's the fact that we live our life differently. We have halachic principles, divine halachic principles that we live by. The Chafetz Chaim tells us that if you don't learn Hilchot Shabbat on a constant basis, he guarantees you, it's Chafetz Chaim, about 100 years ago, great sage, says if you don't review Hilchot Shabbat on a constant basis, you're not keeping Shabbat properly. Because there's so many dinim, so many halachot when it comes to Shabbat. If a person doesn't constantly review it, he's not keeping Shabbat. It's impossible he's keeping it right. And you can't put your head in the sand, right, and say, life is bliss, I don't know better, right? If that doesn't work, especially nowadays when you have so much ability to have the knowledge, okay? And the Tzurba series is a beautiful series that's been put together by Al-Ghazi in Eretz Yisrael. And he was pushed to do it by Harav Mordechai Eliyahu, Zechat Tzadik L'Bracha, Chief Rabbi of Eretz Yisrael. And the Sfarim in Eretz Yisrael have taken on much momentum. They have groups and groups everywhere. They make big siyumim at the end. And Baruch Hashem, in the United States, the English-speaking population have started to translate them, put them together. Mostly rabbis from the Yeshiva University, from Yeshiva Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan, are the ones who are doing the translations and stuff like that. But it is a beautiful series. We've been doing it now in Rockaway for about 3 to 4 years. I think we've been doing it now, and it's this beautiful series. Now the only drawback to these Sfarim that I would say is, first of all, it's not entirely comprehensive. So not every halacha is in there, and not every opinion is in there. Although he does bring a lot of Sephardic poskim and Sephardic halacha, not every single thing is brought down. So throughout my journey through the Tzurba series, if you take a look in my book, I have notes, I have comments, I have pages to look in the other books where I've done the research for us to see what the final psak to come away with from the topics that we're learning. Hilchot Shabbat, before we start Hilchot Shabbat, 2 ideas that we talked about. I'll show you remember one of them. But 2 ideas. First of all, the Gemara in 2 places tells us Shabbat is what's called a matana tova, a good gift that Hashem gave the Jewish people. So the Aruch Shulchan asks, why is Shabbat the good gift? Why is Pesach not a good gift? Why is not the cheesecake holiday a good gift? Right? Why is not the Sukkot a good gift? Why is Shabbat a good gift? So Aruch Shulchan really explains that all those other holidays that we have, they're not really anything more than a historical event that happened to us, and therefore we celebrate it. No one else can celebrate it. Why would the Indian guy celebrate Yetziat Mitzrayim? He didn't leave Mitzrayim. He was still in India now and today and before. But we left. So we celebrate Mitzrayim. But he says Shabbat, why we celebrate Shabbat? Why do we have a weekly Shabbat? Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. So Shabbat really is a mankind holiday. It should be all of the universe should celebrate Shabbat. So God gave it just to the Jews. And in fact, we say in the morning prayer, the Goyim can't have Shabbat. It's halakha. Goyim cannot keep Shabbat. Hashem wanted only the Jews to have Shabbat. Matana tova. You know how special Shabbat is? We sing in the Shalom Aleichem, and towards the end we say, B'tzetchem l'shalom. We tell the angels to go away. Some people skip that line. They say, tell the angels to go away. I want the angels to stay. Now Hida says, we're not kicking them out. We're telling them whenever you leave, goodbye. It's goodbye for whenever you leave. An eventual bye. The Shem Shmuel says no. The Shem Shmuel says, we are kicking them out. We tell them goodbye. Why? Because Shabbat is Beini uvenechem. It's between us and God. That's it. No angels. Angels got to leave the table. It's such a special day that no angels need to be in between. It's us and Hashem. So, we're going to start now. We're on page 23 in the Tzurba Mirabanan, volume 16. Now, page 23. And we're going to start like the Shulchan Aruch starts. There are two major aspects of Shabbat. One is bigger than the other. We'll start with the mitzvot aseh. The mitzvot of what we do on Shabbat. What are the mitzvot that we have to do on Shabbat? The mitzvot aseh. Eventually, when we get to volume 18, with Hashem's help, volume 17, that's where we begin the lo ta'aseh, the don't do's, the melachot of Shabbat. Okay? Which is a lot more complex than what we're starting today. Okay? What's cooking, what's not cooking, how do you leave something on the fire, how do you return something to the fire, tons and tons of halachot. 18? Volume 17. So this is volume 16, towards the end of volume 17, we start the lo ta'aseh. So today, we're going to start the aseh, and if I tell you, when does a person have to be worrying about Shabbat? So what would you tell me? When? What day of the week should I start worrying about Shabbat?
Wednesday.
Okay, he says Thursday, Wednesday night, Sunday. I don't know. When I have to start thinking about Shabbat. It's a Friday morning, Wednesday. We'll say Shabbat. Okay. Mordechai is saying good, because what do we say on Sunday morning when we pray the first day? Hayom Yom Ehad Shabbat Kodesh. We already start counting to Shabbat. So there is an idea there. But the Shulchan Aruch really starts off with a Gemara, based on the Gemara, Mesechet Shabbat. So on page 23, the Gemara tells us an interesting idea about Shabbat. En mafligin b'sfina pachot mishlosha yamim kodem l'Shabbat. You're not allowed to go on a boat, on a ship, 3 days before Shabbat. Okay, what's 3 days before Shabbat?
Wednesday.
He says Wednesday. What are how else can you count it?
Tuesday night.
3 days before Shabbat. So if I'm counting from Shabbat, Friday, Thursday. Or am I counting it Friday, Thursday, Wednesday? We'll see. It's machloket how you count it. Fine. So 3 days before Shabbat, you can't go on a boat. Why is that? Why can't I go on a boat? The Goyim are driving the boat. What do I have to do with the boat? What if I walk on it? What's the big deal? And 3 days before, by the way, this still applies today, right? I know people over the summer or Yeshiva week, they go on the cruise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can't go on the cruise if you're going 3 days before Shabbat onto the boat, if you're going to be there over Shabbat. So it's a very applicable halakha. Now, why can't? Well, let's just take a look at the Shulchan Aruch and source number 2 on page 24. So Shulchan Aruch, based on the Gemara, tells us, Mutter lahaflik b'sfina fil be'erev Shabbat. You're allowed to go on a boat even on Erev Shabbat, even on Friday. Im hoylech ledvar mitzvah. If you're going for a mitzvah, right? You're going to collect funds for yeshiva. You're going to collect funds to get someone out of jail. You're doing a mitzvah. You're allowed to go on a boat. You would also be, by the way, allowed to go on a boat if you're using it as a ferry, right? If you're going from Manhattan to Brooklyn or to Staten Island on the ferry, and it takes a short little time, you're just using it to travel from one spot to another spot. Obviously, you can go on that on Friday as well. Now, okay. V'im acher kach, says the Shulchan Aruch, lo yishvot in okay. So he says like this: if you can go on the boat even on Friday, if it's dvar mitzvah, and you have to make a deal with him, the captain, even if it's for a dvar mitzvah, you make a deal with the captain to stop the boat on Shabbat. But if the captain doesn't listen to you and he continues to drive the boat, you're okay. Okay? So you're going on Friday for a Dvar Mitzvah. You can go on the boat. Tell the guy not to drive. He doesn't listen to you. It's okay. Ein bekach klum, says the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? Aval ledvar harishut. If a guy's going ledvar rishut, not a mitzvah. He's going on a cruise. Some people say it's a mitzvah also. Shalom bayit. I'm for my own sanity. Okay? I don't know about that. But I'm going to have to categorize the cruises under dvar rishut. So, ein mafligin b'sfina pachot mishlosha yamim kodem Shabbat. You cannot go on that boat 3 days before Shabbat. Says the Ramah. So when it says Haggah, right? Haggah is the glosses, the notes that the Ramah puts on the Shulchan Aruch, and he writes of a kodem shloisha yamim shari. But if it's before 3 days, you're allowed to go on the boat. And I'm allowed to go on the boat 3 days before, if I go on, let's say Monday, onto the boat. I'm allowed to go on the boat, even if on Shabbat, I might come to a chance of having to do malacha on Shabbat. Because basically on the old boats, it was very, very rickety-rackety. It was very dangerous, very seasick. So a person might have to do malacha on Shabbat. And he says you're allowed to go on the boat, even though it might come to that chance.
Chance of what?
To be over a malacha on Shabbos.
Which one?
Like what?
Whatever needs to be done. Read again. I feel right. Whatever he has to do in order to stay on that boat, it might have to be over a low taseh. He will be allowed to because he came onto the boat before Wednesday. Okay. Now, why? What's the tam? What's the reason for this halacha? Right? Because let's say I'm going today on a good boat. It's not rickety-rackety. I'm not having it to be... What am I going to have to do? I'm on a Norwegian cruise line. Or better, I'm on the Costa Rica. All the staff is Goyim. There's the medics there. Everything's there. It's a nice, smooth trip. So what's the problem? So the Mishnah Brura, in source number 3, he writes over here a couple of reasons that's brought down by the Rishonim. First, he brings the reason of the Baal HaMaor. And the Baal HaMaor tells us that you're going to be putting yourself in a place that you're definitely going to have to do malacha if you go on Wednesday. Okay? What they explain is the Baal HaMaor is saying that on the olden ships, it took you 3 days to get over the seasickness. All right? To get over the dizziness and all that stuff. So it took you about 3 days to get used to the boat. So if you went on Wednesday, for sure you're going to have to do malacha on Shabbat. And that you're not allowed to put yourself into. When the Ramah said it's okay to do malacha if you went on earlier, that's if it comes to that. But if you come on Wednesday, the Baal HaMaor is explaining, you most probably are going to have to do malacha on Shabbat, and you're not allowed to put yourself in that situation.
Because you might be seasick.
Because that was the way it was.
But the question is, why would the Ramah says that if you happen to be doing a mitzvah, then
so that's Shulchan Aruch. If you're doing the Dvar Mitzvah,
why should that be permitted then if it's for Dvar Mitzvah?
Okay, so the Dvar Mitzvah, it's a good question. I think the understanding is that for a Dvar Mitzvah, you have to go to the fact that he's going on before Shabbat because he's not really doing it on Shabbat, right?
Why
So
before Shabbat is okay. Why supposed to 3 days?
So if it's a Dvar Reshut, we're telling you we're making that difference between Dvar Reshut and Dvar Mitzvah. When it comes to Dvar Mitzvah, we're going to go very literal over here, okay? So technically you can go on a boat before Shabbat. It's a Dvar Mitzvah, we're going to let you go on right before Shabbat even, okay?
At the end of the day, it is allowed.
It is allowed. But since you're most likely going to put yourself in a place of being over Malacha on Shabbat if you go on within 3 days, therefore for Dvar Reshut, you don't have permission to go on.
So when it's for a mitzvah, even though
we allow.
Even though you might come to
right,
Shabbos,
we most likely
even
we would allow it. We would allow it. Right. Okay, that's one reason why it's a problem. The Mishnah Berurah goes on next and tells us that you might be causing others to do malacha for you. Okay, which is also an issue, especially if you have a boat that is run by Jews. All right, an Israeli cruise line. All right, we're going to get into that into a moment. That's going to be a major problem. You're not going to even allow to go on that boat even if it's Sunday. Because definitely Jews are going to, if you're going to stay over Shabbat, definitely Jews are going to be doing malacha for you on Shabbat, which you have no heter whatsoever at all. Okay? Another issue is the issue of the tchum, right? Not your tchumi Shabbat, your eggs, but tchum of Shabbat, which is your distance that you're allowed to travel on Shabbat. All right? So we'll get into it in the future.
Is that the rice or the rabbanon?
Is it? I believe it's a derabbanan.
Tchum?
Yeah, I believe it's a derabbanan. But I don't quote me on that. I have to double check. But there's a certain amount that you're allowed to travel on Shabbat. And now the truth is, if the water is deep, more than 10 tefachim, there is no tchum. Right? It's same thing if you are above in the sky. There's no tchum if you're above 10 tefachim. But what happens in a lot of places, the water, especially where the cruises go, not everything is deep. So you might be within 10 tefachim. So therefore, there is issues of tchum. If you know for sure you're in the deep ocean, whatever you are, then you're not going to have that issue. Another big one, and this is the Rif, and we're going to see that later on the Ramban also says this is a major one, is that bittul, if you take a look at that source 3, the bold line on the bottom of the second paragraph in source 3, says the Rif, the ikra iser mishum bittul mitzvat oneg Shabbat. There's no oneg Shabbat on a boat. Maybe the cruise lines, yes, but definitely in the old boats, there was no oneg Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat, we're going to see, is a very strong reason not to do a lot of things that may be permissible on Shabbat. We don't do it because you have to come to enjoy Shabbat. And if you did everything that was technically permissible, there would be no enjoyment on Shabbat. We're going to take a look at that Rambam in a minute. But the Rif says that because it might come to an issue of not enjoying your time. Some people are very bad with travel. I'm sure you know people like that. They can't go on a boat, plane, car, anything for an extended period. That's it. Mm-hmm. So it's a really an issue of an Oneg Shabbos. The other issue would be, also because you're not allowed to swim on Shabbat. You're not allowed to make yourself a raft or a boat or something like that. So there's a lot of issues of why, says the Mishnah Berurah, it would be a problem to get onto a boat 3 days before Shabbat.
We shouldn't even consider medications nowadays that we have, like Dramamine, to make sure people's motion sickness is lessened.
Right. So there's still other issues. Even if you say perhaps my Oneg Shabbat won't be a problem, you still have the Tchum issue. Even if you say I won't have to do any malacham, you still have the Tchum issue. You still have issue of the Gzeira of swimming, of creating a raft, or doing these other things that might look like that. So all these different things together, Oneg Shabbat, maybe yes, maybe no. There's a lot of things that together causes the issue. And so it seems to be that generally, if you take a look at the summary on page 25, summary, that box, summarize. A few reasons he gives here, right? Avoid a situation which you might have to violate Shabbat, okay? Voyage sickness, okay? Not to swim on Shabbat. These are all issues of why it would be asur to go on a boat 3 days before Shabbat. Now,
so before 3 days, it will be permitted.
Yes.
Because most likely you'll be back before Shabbat hits.
No, because at that time you would get used to the boat. You get equilibrium on the boat.
But how about the other issues on the boat?
So you would have
the swim issue.
You're right.
How about the first issue?
So
person must avoid swim. Which one would?
You're right. You're right. But going back to the Dvar Mitzvah. So it's a really, if you're on the boat and you're not doing anything, you're not technically violating Shabbat. So if you're going on early, again, you're not violating Shabbat, right? And so we're going to allow these things that might be issues later, we're going to allow them to slide because you're not going and putting yourself in that situation at that time within those 3 days. That's what the Chachamim did. Now, Rabbi Tzvi Goldberg on page 26, he writes, there are two lenient factors to keep in mind. Look at the third paragraph on source 26. Source 4 on page 26. Two lenient factors. First, according to the Vilna Gaon, the 3 days are Thursday, Friday, Shabbat. Okay? Wednesday was not an issue. Okay? So a person would allow to go on Wednesday. In fact, Chamovadi brings down that's the halakha, Wednesday. You're allowed to go on the boat Wednesday. This counts as from Thursday. Thursday, Friday, Shabbat. The halakha b'ura, Chacham David Yosef asks, what about Wednesday night? Oh, Wednesday's Wednesday. What about Wednesday night? Is Wednesday night Wednesday or is Wednesday night Thursday? Right? So he doesn't say, but he says don't go. Don't go on. He doesn't say it's definitely Thursday, but he says better not to go on Wednesday night. So the heter is Wednesday day.
I also wanted to clarify something. The days in which they're going, it's all working with the assumption that you're planning to actually be on the boat on Shabbat.
Yes.
In other words, if
yes.
you're planning to come back,
yeah.
there's no prohibition
we
you
said
might end up
that.
on
We
Shabbat.
said that. Like you can go on a ferry on Friday because
As
you
long
can
as coming back.
right because you're gonna go hop on Staten Island and get off in
Yeah,
Brooklyn.
There's no like zera. Oh, you might
Right.
end up on.
This is if you're planning to stay on the boat on Shabbat.
Yes.
Okay? Right. So you're on a 7-day cruise or whatever it is. Okay. So before I go on, this is a beautiful sefer if anyone has their hands in it. The Laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Nachson. And here he brings all the Sephardic poskim. I'm not gonna say all. Right? He picks and chooses also at times. But it's his book and he can do as he wants. So here he writes a couple halachot. First of all, he says there are other things you have to take in mind before you get on this boat. He says over here, read you his lashon. Does the cruise line have electric doors?
Yeah.
Okay, because how are you getting in and out of your room? Do they all? By the way, some places don't even have more manual keys. You don't even have the possibility. It's all electric. It's all card swiped. Okay. What about the bathroom? How are you walking in there? There's no more switches in most of the hotels. The toilet don't have switch either. Nothing has a switch. Everything is in order to econom, in order to make some save some money. Everything is on automatic. So you have a lot of more problems. Okay, because you cannot tell a guy. But there are exceptions for sure. Other things, there are mitzvah. But in a general principle, you can't tell a guy to do anything on Shabbat that you can't do. Okay, so you can't tell the guy turn the lights on. If you can't do that, so it becomes very, very tricky to go on a cruise. So I don't know. I don't know what people do if they go on and how they do this. He says this can present a very difficult situation for an observant Jew. Okay, so it didn't even get into the Pritzut issue. Well, I'm assuming you're on a cruise with the mechitza and all the other stuff, but we're talking about Hilchot Shabbat. So one should not travel on such a boat, Rabbi Nachson writes here. So you really have to pay attention to these things. You have to pay attention to these things. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that go on in here. What he does say is that, okay, all right, what else he goes on over here? Let me just see if anything else we have to mention. 90. We did this. Okay, fine. All right. Now we're going to come into another whole issue. What about going on a boat with Jewish sailors? Okay, so this is going on an Israeli cruise line where the staff are all non-religious Jews. Katz, Goldstein, and every other Jewish name out there. They're on the boat and they're your staff. Would that be another issue? Right? Because there are circumstances when you can tell a guy to do something for us on Shabbat. Generally you can't. But there are times that you could. We'll get to Amir L'Nachri in time. But you can never tell a Jew to do something.
Is it majority Jewish, the staff?
Yeah. Israeli cruise line will be majority Jewish. I mean, unless they got all the Arabs, but then you might not have a cruise line left. Okay? I don't know. So it's an issue here. So when they brought this question to Rav Moshe Feinstein, is Igrot Moshe, he says, I think it might be permitted if you go on Monday, Tuesday. If you go on before Wednesday. You're not really telling them. He has as far as over here. But if you take a look at the next source, in source number 6, this is Chacham Ovadia Yosef in his Yechiv Da'at, and he writes, absolutely not. I don't care what day you come on. If the majority of the staff is Jewish, you can't go on it on Shabbat. And he says they cannot let the boat even move on Shabbat either. They have, if they're going to be on the boat, they have to anchor it. But then you have the problem of them doing things for you on Shabbat. And he brought from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. See, Chamavaji brought from the Lubavitcher Rebbe on page 28, the second paragraph over there. He already publicized his opinion among rabbis in the Holy Land. It's clarified with great experts. There's no danger to stop the ship on Friday in the middle of the ocean. He completely rejected the formidable proofs that say the ship moves automatically and they're not moving it. Considerable desecrations of Shabbat for one who travels on a ship on Shabbat that are owned by Jews. So Chamavadia, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, said absolutely no permission to go on a boat that its staff is Jewish. Even if you go and says, look at the next Minchat Yitzchak, and he says, even Asur La'aflik, and at the Sfina, the driver and the sailors, Yehudim, Asur La'aflik ba af mitchilat hashvuah. Even if you go on that boat on Sunday.
It seems obvious. What was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein telling you?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Because maybe you're not telling them.
Yeah, he says they're performing
you're not telling them explicitly. They want to do it.
They're not doing it. You're not telling them to do it.
I'm not. You're right. It makes a little sense. I'm not telling them to do it. They're doing this of their own accord.
You still can benefit from a Jew breaking Shabbat.
You can't. You can't benefit only if you tell them. No. Even if you don't tell them, you can't benefit.
So Moshe has his reasonings, but for us, Yechav Da'at is the final. So you have to know your staff, who's on it. So if it's Gomez and other such names, Anderson and stuff like that, I don't even know today any name could be Jewish, by the way. I've met a lot of people with very interesting last names that are completely Jewish. Thank you, Ellis Island. Okay, so you really have to know, but you can safely assume that American cruise lines and stuff like that, the ones in America and stuff like that, are run by Goyim. You don't have to assume that the majority of them are Jewish, because most Jews don't take cruise line work. Okay, as staff. All right, fine. So that's that. The Yalkut Yosef on page 29. He goes back to this idea that we said that one of the reasons he can't go on the boat on Wednesday was because of Onek Shabbat. You're not going to be able to enjoy Shabbat. So based on this, the Yalkut Yosef says, therefore, page 29 in the bowl, therefore, for surgery which is not urgent, okay, just as taking out your tonsils, one should schedule for the beginning of the week, as perhaps they will need to violate Shabbat in caring for him following the surgery. Okay? If it's not an emergency surgery, you shouldn't do it Wednesday, you shouldn't do it Thursday, Friday. You know, some people actually plan it that way. I've met people, they say, I'd rather do it Thursday, Friday, this way I'll only miss one day of work. Right? And then I'll come back to work on Monday. You're not allowed to do that, because first of all, you might be Mechalel Shabbat, and there's no way you're going to have Oneg Shabbat. How are you going to enjoy Shabbat? Now, obviously, there's a few exceptions over here. Obviously, if it's an emergency, then it's an emergency. Also, if the surgeon, who is the good surgeon, is not going to be available a different day, and that's the only days available, he only does Thursdays, right? The rest of the week he plays golf. So you're going to have to take a Thursday. You have no choice. But if it can be scheduled earlier, a person should never, ever schedule it for Thursday, Friday, Erev Shabbat, where he knows that he might need to be Mechalel Shabbat, and he definitely won't come to enjoy Shabbat in his pain.
This 3-day business with the ships, that is a rabbinic decree, right?
Mm-hmm.
So can we add things to it? It seems like this might be out of bounds.
No, it's not out of bounds. It's basing it on the same reason.
It's an extension.
It's the reasoning. We're using the Tam Hadover to tell us what else should be a problem. So anything that won't let you to have Oneg Shabbat, you shouldn't do within a few days before Shabbat.
So this is just an example.
Right. Don't set yourself up in a situation where you can't come to enjoy Shabbat. Mm-hmm. Okay? I once had to speak to somebody. Someone once told me they wanted to go to a convention in Vegas for something. Mm-hmm. And so I said to them, and what are you doing for Shabbat? Oh, I'm going to eat the Sudot in my room. And I'm going to walk to the hotel where they're having the lectures and stuff like that. I told them, I'm not so sure how this works, because where's your Oneg Shabbat? You're eating in a room by yourself with some things, Now I heard when they do the Diamond Expo in Vegas, they rent a hall. They bring in food. They bring in from Queens. They bring in a caterer. They bring in the food, and they have the minyan, and they have the singing, and they have all the stuff. And they also go to the expo. So I don't know if that part's still questionable, but at least they're making an Onek Shabbat. Okay, because to put yourself in a situation where you know you're not going to come to enjoy Shabbat, and or put yourself in a situation where you might have to be Mechalel Shabbat, a person should never do optionally. Okay, that's what really comes out from over here. Let's look at one more topic over here.
Sorry. Also, the surgery is only if you're the patient scheduling. It sounds like it's not necessarily for the surgeon who's doing it.
Right? No, not the surgeon. The surgeon, what is he? He's going to do the surgery and go back to golf. He's got nothing to worry about. Okay, it's the patient. Okay, now, what about traveling on a train or a trolley on Shabbat? Okay, so first of all, there's no issue with payments, right? Why not? In New York City, you can jump the turnstile and it's okay. Everyone does it. So you don't need to worry about payment. Okay, so let's say you already took care of the payment, whatever it is. What about going on a train? Okay, so you have some of the same issues, first of all. If it's an intercity train, that means it goes from one city to the next. So you have the issue of Tchum, right? You might be leaving Tchum, you might have that issue. What if my train is way up in the sky? It's like an elevated train. Still, since it's connected, Chumavadya says, since it's connected, because they're standing on something, that's considered still on the ground, and therefore there is still Tchum. So that might be an issue. Sometimes they want to say the motor works more because there are more people on it. Well, let's say it doesn't. Let's say it's automatic and it does the same thing. Will there be an issue of going on a train or a trolley on Shabbat? Okay, before Shabbat, on Shabbat. Here's a very important Yesod Ramban on page 30. Rabotai, let's look at this Rambam inside because this is a very important Rambam.
Excuse me, why they started with going to boat?
Because they know people want to travel a lot. A person should not do stuff that you're not even commanded not to do. You still shouldn't do them on a day of rest. To measure the grain, and to count the fruit, and to clear away the vessels, and to move the stones from house to house. All these stuff are technically permissible on Shabbat and Yom Tov. There's no Isser in moving things. You can count things, 2, 3, 4. There's no Isser. But yet we don't do them. Why not? Because if you did, the shuk, hashuk maloi lekol mekachu memchar. It'll be full of people doing business transactions. People giving credit. Okay, you can take stuff from the store on Shabbat on credit. This is what people will be doing. And all day people will come and going, says the Ramban. Therefore, says the Ramban, that Shabbat and Yom Tov, even stuff that are not considered melacha, lekach armator Shabbaton, Shiyeh Yom Shvita Umnucha Lo Yom Torach. He says, why does he use the Lashon Shabbaton? Shabbaton means to sit and relax. The Torah is telling us not just don't do malacha, but you have to set up Shabbat to be a day of relaxing. It has to be a day of enjoyment. Shabbat has to be a day that's kaif. I enjoy it. It's good. That's how you have to set it up, says the Ramban. Shabbat and Yom Tov. Even there are things that you're permissible to do, you cannot do them. Because it's called Shabbaton. Therefore, says the Hatam Sofer. He says, look at source 11 on page 31. Person who travels on a train, on a steam engine, there's no Onik Shabbat, says the Hatam Sofer, because his body is shaking back and forth, back and forth. You ever on the D train, one of those trains, you ever try standing as a strap hanger? Phew, phew, you're running back, you're sitting on the seat, you're going into the other guy's seat. You're moving back and forth. He says your body's swaying, there's no Onik Shabbat. Who enjoys Shabbat by being swayed back and forth like that on a train? He says, therefore, it's totally out. He says, based on this Ramban, which was also the Rif that we saw earlier, is that, no, you can't do any modes of transportation. So not a plane, not a boat, not a train. All these things you should not be doing on Shabbat. Even if you're saying, I'm not doing any malacha, I'm coming on, I'm coming off, it's all automatic, it's not me, right? Even if there's no tchum issue, he's saying it shouldn't be done because it doesn't let you enjoy Shabbat. There's no onik Shabbat.
What if it's like let's say your own private jet and you have a minyan there? Would that be okay?
So a plane coming in and out of a place, it's already an issue of tchum. It's coming out of one city, right? And when it enters back, it's going back to the ground and it's doing another tchum issue. So if you actually end off, for whatever reason you are on a flight that disembarked on Shabbat, you are not allowed to leave the plane. Unless they force you out of the plane, then you have to stay in the airport. You can't leave from there because of the issue of tchum. So it's, unless you're staying on the plane over the whole Shabbat, like if a person is traveling to the Philippines, which takes about over a day, over 25 hours. So the Sfarim over here, Rabbi Nachson writes, talk to your local Orthodox Rav before you head on such a flight, because there will be other issues as well. Obviously, you still have the turbulence issue, right? Because that's not Onik Shabbat. It's really frowned upon to do any sort of travel over Shabbat, all right, over Shabbat. A person should really not get into that. Yes?
If we're going to be so agnostic about like every hour that we spend on Shabbat being on it, like if someone goes to the in-law, hypothetically, that they don't like, does that mean
The boom
that's a good question. I would say two things.
Very relevant.
I would say, first of all, your in-laws are going to be around for a long time, hopefully.
Oh.
In fact, that person's wife, if you love your wife, you would want her to live a long life. And one of her ways for her to get a long life is to do kibbud of aim. So going to her parents is an important thing. In fact, Shechanah breaks down, you have to stand up for your father-in-law.
Whoa.
So you have to treat him exactly like your father.
The sauce.
Yeah, you have to treat him. You have to treat him like your father. You have to stand up when he walks into the room and stuff like that. So a person has to work on it. I know it's not easy. It never is. It never is. But you don't have. You have to figure out things. You have to figure out how to deal. You should have a shiur that you need to run to, and you have to have other needs that you need to go and do. But you should also spend some time.
No, I'm saying like in general, like.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, unless it's like a really stressful situation where they're kind of like. I mean, if it's just not comfortable, it's one thing. You're not there though. I mean, if you're over there.
No, I'm not saying like.
I mean, if a person's there over the whole Shabbat.
Not just in-laws, like I'm just thinking an example.
People in
like,
general.
Any setting that they're in that's not enjoyable. So.
Right. A person should not set himself up to be in a place that's not enjoyable on Shabbat. Now, if it happens. But he shouldn't set himself up to be in that situation. I think that's what we're really coming out with. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Says it sits Eliezer in source 12. If that's true with trains, then that's for sure true with airplanes, right? It's even more rickety rackety and more uncomfortable over there. Especially a lot of us who like to take the economy seats. Okay, I got once next to a big guy. He used the bathroom like 10 times. Okay, so and I actually what's it called? Offered to switch seats to let him take the aisle, but he didn't want it. He wanted the window. Okay, but it was okay. Okay. So we saw that Yalkut Yosef on source 14. The Shabbos Atzma also lehitchil le'aflik b'sfina af imroiv nasem hem goyim filu dvar mitzvah. Okay. On Shabbat itself, for sure it's forbidden to start, even for a dvar mitzvah, to go on a boat. Okay, to go on a plane, to go on these things would be usher to do. Okay, he talks about when you leave the airport, if you actually ended up landing on Shabbat, like we mentioned, don't leave the plane, but they'll force you off the plane, then you'll just stay in the airport.
So you
Okay.
You can't leave voluntarily?
No, you have to wait for them to tell you to go out.
I have a question. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned earlier that if you know that whatever mode of transportation is going to be 10 tefachim over land or under land.
Technically, it's not. There's no tchum issue, right?
So why is flying a problem with?
It's the initial. It's the initial.
What if, let's say, you're like flying out of JFK and you're flying through the city?
So
And eventually, by the time you're already up like past the city, I'm assuming that's 10.
right, for sure. So you're leaving Erev Shabbat,
Erev Shabbat, and you're going to be flying over.
and when you're landing.
Let's say Shabbat, and let's say after Shabbat.
So we said, so on Shabbat it's definitely an issue, because when you're re-entering, you're going through Tchum, and you're leaving from one to next, so that's a problem. And if you come, you can't disembark. If you're going to come after Shabbat, there is wiggle room, but again, you have to talk to your local Orthodox rabbi at that time before you do the travel, just to know what else to do. Again, never recommended to spend your Shabbat on a plane, okay, for Oneg Shabbat issues. Okay, let's see if we can get through one more section. Yes, Tadi.
Let's say the airplane go from New York to Philadelphia, and all this between, there is no, that all of them is built, is a house. There is no empty. So if there is no, there is, what is the
How there is no empty between here and Philadelphia?
all is houses.
No, it's not. It's plenty of open space.
For example, here to New Jersey,
Plenty of open space.
plenty of what?
Plenty of open space. Drive on the highways, you'll see tons of open space.
No matter where you go, there's empty space.
But you
2,000 amot, it's not a lot.
Yeah, I know.
2,000 amot is not a lot, and you have plenty of open space that's more than 2,000 amot from here to anywhere. Once you leave the city, outskirts of the city, 2,000 amot is not a lot. It's not a lot of walk. A lot of people make this mistake when they go up to the country in December. They take a Shabbat walk, and they don't realize they just left the last house and they walk 2,000 amot, which is a short walk, and then they get to a place that's outside the Tchum now, and technically they can't move anymore. They have to stop there. And what?
How they calculate it?
So you have to understand what 2,000 amot is and figure it out. So you have to really realize it. And people make those mistakes a lot in the summer and when they go up to the country. Don't take the walks that's too far outside the closest houses and stuff. Okay, you have to pay attention to this. There's a nice shiur my Shiva gave, or Sarvaisman gave on Hilchot of the summer, and he goes through it in depth. How to pay attention to these things when you're out there. Okay, let's just do one more Indian, and then we're going to do the Parsha Musar. Okay, on page 34. Selecting special foods for Shabbat. Mechilta, that's a Midrash halacha, right? What? If a person sees a nice piece of food, you should say it is for Shabbat. Gemara Masechet Bava Metzia, in Beitza, Masechet Beitza, source 16, they said, Amru al Shammai Azakon, Kol Yomav hayochel lechavod Shabbat. Matzah behemena omer zelu Shabbat. Matzah acheret na'a hemena meniach et hashniya ve'ochel et harishona. Aval Hillel Azakon, right? What did he do? Miyada acheret haitlo. He had a different opinion. Shekol ma'asav Hashem shemayim shnemar. Baruch Hashem yom yom. B'tsham yomim echad b'shabayach l'shabbatayach. U'beitil omrim Baruch Hashem yom yom. What's going on? Shammai would do this. Shammai would walk in the market on Sunday, see a nice animal. This is for Shabbat. Walks in the market on Monday. Oh, no, this is for Shabbat. Eats the first one. Hillel didn't do that. Hillel waited till Friday. Showed up and bought everything. So Mishnah Berurah says, even though most times, look at source 17, even though most times we go with Hillel will agree to go with Shammai. That what a person should do is look out for good food and good stuff already the whole week. And don't wait for Friday. So why did Hillel do what he did? Hillel was more bitachon in Hashem, so he didn't buy anything until the last moment he knew he was going to get. But an average person should go and prepare. Though the Penina Halacha in source 18 tells us a very true statement. He says, today, this concept of Shammai, of going Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, doesn't really exist anymore. And it might actually work opposite for you. Why? Because the stores stock the new food Wednesday, Thursday. Towards the end of the week. So if you want to get Shabbat food, you don't go Sunday. You're going to buy last week's stuff. Half off the dips and stuff. Okay? So you have to go Wednesday, Thursday. In fact, a person can even go Friday. If it's winter time, we'll tell you to go Thursday. You also want to beat the rush. You don't want too many people there at the same time. Right? Especially if you have a parking lot. You don't want someone to go with their... be careful if you go to the bingo parking lot, right, near me. People try to fit between the cars with those wagons. They're going to swipe your car over there. So It's people. Jews love to think they can fit through things and just walk like that. All right, they don't want to take the bag and go around. So be careful. But a person should go at a time when he knows there's new food, when there's good food there. So that's what the Pinin Halacha says over here. He says, therefore, the most important point today is to plan one's shopping in a manner that the Shabbat foods will be the best ones. Okay, you want to go when it's fresh, when it's good. You know, we all know how to shop. We don't take the stuff right in the front. Look at the date. Look at the one in the back of it. Okay, make sure it's not expired. Although I know a lot of Jewish items don't have an expiration date, they just forever good. Okay, so I'm not the only one. Like my wife and I are like, when does this expire? It doesn't expire because it's you can leave it forever. But okay, we'll keep it over here. What's that?
The best is Friday, right? To buy. You must buy